Hi, I'm Sam LaPratte. I hope you join us for an hour to give right here on Rogers TV. We're going to talk about everything that is going to inspire you about this beautiful city.
Join us for the new season of Ottawa Storytellers, right here on Rogers TV.
Public transit, garbage pickup, parks and recreation programs, snow removal on your street. How can you stay informed about these and other important local services? Tune to City Council coverage on Rogers TV. See your community leaders at work on Rogers TV City Council coverage.
This is Rogers TV.
Good morning and welcome. My name is Sulaine Ching, and it is my honor to be the President and CEO of the Ottawa Board of Trade. On behalf of Mayor Mark Sutcliffe, the Ottawa Board of Trade, and the Ottawa Business Journal, welcome to the Mayor's Breakfast on this beautiful morning in City Hall. I'm joined this morning by my co-presenter, Michael Curran, who is the President and Publisher of the Ottawa Business Journal, our premier business media outlet. We are thrilled to be gathered here today in City Hall in beautiful downtown Ottawa. Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. We honor the peoples and the land of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation. We honor all First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples and their valuable past and present contributions to this land. I want to say thank you to the team at City Hall for hosting us here today, and to our event partner, Centurion, for that wonderful breakfast that we all enjoyed, and to Rogers TV for broadcasting us. Please encourage those in your network to catch up on the replay of today's conversation that's made possible by Rogers. Thank you all for being here this morning. We really appreciate the time and energy that you are investing in the growth of our business community and the building of our city. I want to say a special welcome to the leaders of the Ottawa Board of Trade, board members Brenton McGinty from Strategies 360, Julie Lupinacci from Hydro Ottawa, Devinder Chaudhry of Ayana Restaurant Collective, and Priya Balu from TAG HR. Thank you for your steadfast leadership in our business community. I would also like to acknowledge our OBOT ambassadors, Linda McCallum Royal LePage Team Realty, and Monica Hailstone from the Hilton Garden in Ottawa downtown. Our ambassadors are wonderful at welcoming our new members, ensuring that they're maximizing their benefits. So thank you so much to them and to all of our OBOT members, partners, and volunteers for making sure that Ottawa has a strong voice of business. I want to say a special welcome to our guest speaker today, the Honourable Anita Anand, President of the Treasury Board. Thank you so much for being here with us this morning, and we're looking forward to your conversation. Please join me in welcoming also MP Yasser Naqvi, MP Marie-France Lalonde, and the Honourable Mona Fortier. Thank you for being here with us today, as well as Councillor Riley Brockington, Councillor David Hill, Councillor Ralston King, and Councillor Catherine Kitts. We really appreciate everything that you are doing for our community as leaders. Thank you. OBOT also would like to acknowledge our pillar partners that are joining us here today. Thank you so much for your ongoing support, Enbridge Gas, BDO Canada, and the Meridian Credit Union. We couldn't do this work without you. Thank you for being here for us. The Ottawa Board of Trade is the voice of business and a key economic partner in our region with a mission to cultivate a thriving, it says thrilling, but it's supposed to be thrilling and thriving world-class business community. We are committed to convening local business and community leaders to connect and to collaborate on important issues as we build up Ottawa. On behalf of the OBOT Board and our economic partners, I am excited to share that several months of analysis, consultation, and research has culminated in the launch of our Downtown Ottawa Action Agenda called A Living Capital. Last year, we declared the transformation of downtown Ottawa a top priority and called on every level of government, our business community, and every resident in our region to do the same. Since then, we have engaged key stakeholders in our region from both the private and the public sectors. We have secured the expertise of the Canadian Urban Institute to create our community action plan, building on the work of the OBOT Economic Development Committee, led by Hugh Gorman, our Good Neighbours Initiative in partnership with RPIC and our colleagues in Gatineau, and of course, the Downtown Revitalization Report that was led by MP Yasser Naqvi. CUI was able to leverage key intel and best practices from cities across the globe to ensure that we curated the best plan for Ottawa's future, and we are deeply grateful for the way that they have gone above and beyond in our city. We then struck an advisory council to inform and lead the work in a way that we felt confident would result in implementation. Many thanks to our partners at the City of Ottawa, Ottawa Tourism, Invest Ottawa, BOMA Ottawa, and the National Capital Commission, as well as our OBOT pillar partners and committee members for making this plan. Thank you to MP Yasser Naqvi, MP Marie-France Lalonde, the Honourable Mona Fortier, and Minister Jennifer Sudds, as well as Mayor Sutcliffe and City Councillors Ariel Troster and Stephanie Plant for your engagement and leadership on this important matter. Downtown Ottawa is the heartbeat of our whole region. What happens in downtown has a direct and immediate effect on every business, every resident, and every visitor. Our post-pandemic world is very different from what we have known and relied upon. Our local economy, and especially our downtown, have been hit hard by the changing nature of work. We will not go back to the way it was, but we can focus on diversification and transformation. Simply put, we need more people in the city core. To that end, we support all private and public employers willing to increase their workforce presence in the core. We encourage all residents in our region to be hometown tourists, inviting family and friends to explore the downtown. We call on all business and community leaders to leverage your international networks and our growing number of direct flights to invite more people to our region. And we invite all creatives, entrepreneurs, innovators, and out-of-the-box thinkers to consider our city core for their next big idea. This is an all-hands-on-deck situation, and now is the time. Our vision fosters a holistic live, work, play environment, one that creates a culturally rich, inclusive, and accessible downtown for all, one that boosts our local economy, and one that attracts artists, investors, innovators, leaders, talent, and young people. Our plan targets 4 big moves to realize that vision: to add 40,000 new residents to downtown, to attract 50,000 new jobs to downtown, to establish a joint $500 million fund to kickstart this action plan, and to focus on catalytic anchors for downtown, including investment in the Spark Street and Byward Market realms, the creation of a business incubation district, and an arts and culture corridor. You can learn more at www.livingcapitalottawa.ca. We are confident that this focused plan will reverse our current trajectory, positively impact our tax base, and enable us to provide the services that we rely on for a high quality of life. Each of us has a role and a vested interest in the success of our city core, and we are calling on all of you, our residents, our businesses, and stakeholders to join us in reshaping our city core, making downtown Ottawa more diverse, resilient, and vibrant than ever before, and making our city, Canada in one city, a place that every Canadian is proud to call their capital. Thank you. As we kick off the breakfast, let's recognize the wonderful organizations that support this series. Our lead sponsor and today's presenting sponsor, Hydro Ottawa, Algonquin College, Edelman, Commissionaires Ottawa, Enbridge, Ottawa Senators Hockey Club, RBC, the Westin Ottawa, our global partners, Oakwood and Casino Lac Limi, our audiovisual partner, Ottawa Print Services, our speaker gift sponsor, Eamon Hardin, our coffee sponsor, Capital Office Interiors, and our breakfast sponsors, La Cité. A big round of applause for all of our sponsors for making it possible. Now, please welcome our featured sponsor today, the President and CEO of Hydro Ottawa, Bryce Conrad.
So as I tell my kids, I'm going to read the room. So for the benefit of those who don't know, when you were the lead sponsor, they give you a 35-minute infomercial at the start of these. So I was going to start with a transition and explain the electricity transition, but I won't. I wanted to thank Su Ling and Michael just because they never get enough credit for keeping the business community at the forefront of everything we do. And I think these moments are, with the revitalization of the downtown, I think it's just critical that we acknowledge the work that they do. So just thank you, Su Ling. Thank you, Michael. Incredible job. I'm reading the room saying no one's here to listen to me, so I will. If you don't know who Hydro Ottawa is, you're in the wrong room. And I just want to say that the sound of those air conditioners that you hear in the morning, it's getting that time of year. That's revenue, so don't be afraid to go home and turn down the temperature a bit. But thank you very much, and enjoy the speech.
Thank you, Bryce. And thank you, Bryce, for your leadership and being such an important part of our community and our business community. It is now my pleasure to welcome Mayor Mark Sutcliffe to start our conversation.
Thank you, Su Ling. Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. I got to say, that's the best sponsor speech I've ever heard. How about a hand for Bryce? They should all be like that. They should all be like that. So if you're a sponsor of an event in the future, please take notes. Bonjour tout le monde, je suis très heureux d'être ici avec vous ce matin pour cet événement très spécial et je vous remercie pour votre présence ici à l'Hôtel de Ville et je suis très heureux de vous présenter mon invité de ce matin dans quelques instants. I wanted to start though by saying a big thank you to the leadership of the Board of Trade, Sue Ling, and the members of the Board of Directors, led by Brendan McGinty. Many of the members of the board, as you know, are here this morning, and the work that they have done over the last few months, leading up to the release yesterday of this Downtown Action Plan, has really been remarkable. I've been around economic development for something like 30 years in Ottawa as through my involvement with the Ottawa Business Journal and other work that I've done, and as a business owner myself. And I think right now the Board of Trade is doing amazing work, and we're so lucky to have the people who are choosing to serve on the Board of Directors and volunteer for the board, and to have a great leader like Sue Ling, who is championing downtown Ottawa, championing local businesses, and making business, the voice of business, heard very loudly throughout the community. So I wanted to salute them and thank them for all the work that they've done leading up to yesterday's release. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup. This really is a critical time for our city. It's a very important time. Big changes are coming to downtown Ottawa. Big changes have already started to happen. And we need to work together. I talk a lot about Team Ottawa, and we need to work together as a team. That includes the business community, and it includes small business owners and tourism operators and leaders from throughout the city. It includes members of City Council. It includes representatives of other levels of government. It includes the big companies that are operating here in Ottawa, the real estate businesses, the landlords. We need to make some very significant decisions about the future of downtown Ottawa. And as I said yesterday when this report was released, we're not going back to 2019. The downtown Ottawa of 2019 will never exist again. But that doesn't mean we can't be excited about the future of downtown Ottawa, that we can't look forward to a downtown that is more vibrant, where more people are living, where more people are coming to attend events and attractions, where there's more economic opportunity in the future. So this is an exciting time. It's an anxious time. It's a concerning time, it's a worrying time, but it is an exciting time. So let's look at it that way, and let's work together on the future of downtown Ottawa. The other thing I want to quickly mention, which Sue Ling touched on, is, I hear wherever I go in the community, especially in the business community, I hear people talking about the need for more direct flights in and out of Ottawa Airport. This is really, really important work, and I'm pleased to see the progress that we are making. There's still a lot that we need to do, but we are seeing, finally, Air Canada is expanding its service to Ottawa. Porter Airlines has made a huge investment in our city, and we were at the opening of the new hangar, 150,000 square foot facility. They're increasing the number of jobs in Ottawa. They're increasing the number of flights in and out of Ottawa. So we're seeing progress on that, and I'm looking forward to seeing more progress on that in the future as well. All right, so let's get to our guest this morning. I'm delighted to welcome Anita Anand as our guest, President of the Treasury Board. And Anita is a real trailblazer in politics, and has served in a number of important roles in the federal cabinet since she was first elected in 2019 as the Member of Parliament for Oakville. She served as the Minister of Public Services and Procurement during the pandemic. So she oversaw Canada's procurement of vaccines and personal protective equipment during the pandemic. She also served as Minister of National Defense. But I mentioned she has been a trailblazer. She is the first Hindu woman to be elected as a Member of Parliament in Canada, and the first Hindu person to be a member of the federal cabinet. And while she was serving as Minister of National Defense, Minister Anand led Canada's efforts to provide military aid to Ukraine during the 2022 Russian invasion of Ukraine, which continues to this day, and sought to reform the culture of the Canadian Armed Forces, which had been going through a lot of challenges, obviously, following a series of scandals and incidents of misconduct. And Minister Anand is, obviously not a career politician, having just served in the House of Commons for the last 5 years. She had a very long and distinguished career before that as a law professor at the University of Toronto, and having held academic positions at Yale, Queen's, and Western University. She served in the area of and taught in the area of corporate law. So she has a very long and distinguished career before going into politics. So please join me in welcoming Minister Anita Anand. That one's for you. Good morning, welcome, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for
Pleasure
having me.
to-
Bonjour tout le monde.
It's great to have you here, and I wanted to, before we get to anything else, it was your birthday on the weekend, so happy belated birthday, but you got a very special birthday present from your daughter, in a way, which is, you were just telling me, your daughter won the Canadian weightlifting championships, is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, so tell us about that. That's very exciting, very impressive.
Well, I have 4 children, donc j'aime beaucoup de personnes, surtout mes enfants, tous mes enfants. Over the weekend, one of the twins, so I have a son who's turning 28, twins who just turned 26, and my youngest who turned 23 in April. And so they're really bunched up together. One of my daughters won the Canadian National Weightlifting Championship in her category this weekend. Another one graduated with her master's, and it was just an all-out family weekend, which was really about family, which I think is probably the most important thing in the world. So thank you for raising that.
Yeah, congratulations to her. So you showed me a little video of her lifting. No, this is great. I mean, like, you showed me this video. She's lifting 112 kilograms or something like that, which is 250 pounds, I think. She's not like a really large person. She's how did this happen? How did she end up in weightlifting? And
Well, does anybody here have twins? Because when twins are born, they're very tiny. And both of my daughters, when they were born, were tiny. And so to see, and both of them lift weights, and to see them carrying so much weight, one's a power lifter, one's a weightlifter, I'm like, I don't know. Basically, the answer to your question, c'est difficile de croire. But I will say, the kids make fun of me a lot. That's kind of the pastime in the family. And they often say, Mom is the least athletic person in the family. And we all chuckle, ha, ha, ha. And then I say, well, I'm actually the only one playing a team sport every day, guys. And that's really what life in Ottawa and in politics has proven to me to be, which is that it does take a collective effort to accomplish large things. And you mentioned the pandemic when you were doing the introduction. Well, yes, I was the Minister of Procurement and led the procurement of vaccines, and my background in corporate law and contracts made a big difference when we were evaluating purchasers, et cetera. But it was the public servants who stepped up in spades during the pandemic and beyond to ensure that our country survived. So I don't take that credit. I give the credit to them because they acted with such great integrity and went above and beyond the call of duty. These were phone calls and meetings in the middle of the night, and twice a day with my deputy minister, for example. This just was an all-out effort by our public service, and I think we should give them a round of applause.
Absolutely. Anytime your kids razz you about your athletic ability, just remind them that you carried 2 people around for 9 months without putting them down. So
I don't know, there must be many parents in the room. How many parents have witnessed time and time again the eye roll, the major eye roll, mom complaining again, that kind of thing. So that even in their 20s, this is something that I enjoy, let's put it that way.
I have a daughter who's about to turn 13, so eye rolls are plentiful in our house. So I wanted to ask you one more question about your family before we move on to your work, but you're a lawyer and a federal cabinet minister. You have a sister who's a lawyer, and you have another sister who's a doctor. So I'd like to know a little bit about your parents, because they obviously did a great job. Pretty impressive family.
Well, as I said, I'm a family girl at heart, and we grew up in the Annapolis Valley in Nova Scotia. Any Nova Scotians in the room? I think there's at least one. Yeah. And so my parents, in the 1950s, they met in Ireland. They got married in England. They lived in Nigeria and India, and then they chose to immigrate to a town of 5,000 people in the heart of the Annapolis Valley in Nova Scotia and raised 3 daughters. And c'était incroyable comme enfant, comme sœur, comme étudiante là. I was just so privileged to be able to grow up in a beautiful place in our country and an idyllic town, and I think that represents the very best of Canada and really has formed the foundation of my reasoning for giving back. My mom always told us that you have to serve your communities, you have to give back. And both my parents have passed away, and my mom never knew that I was going to run for politics, but she did try to encourage me to do that. And I always say, there's not a chance, Mom. I'm not doing it. I saw how much media, for example, politicians receive, and I said, I don't think so. But I kind of wish she could see now all of the things that have happened because her words were prescient and toujours dans ma cœur.
So why did you run then? Why did you change your mind about that and decide to run 5 years ago?
Oh my goodness, Mark, I didn't know we were covering all this stuff. All the emotions. So in 2018, I was asked to run provincially. And my youngest was not graduating from high school yet, and so I said, not the right time. And then in 2019, I was asked to run federally, and I'm sure there are others in the audience who have been asked to run for office, and perhaps you did what I did, which is to say, it's such an honor to be asked, no thank you. Toujours mes collègues ici aussi, Mona, Marie-France, and Yasser aussi, you know what I'm talking about. It's a huge step to do that, to say yes. And so it took a few conversations, I would say more than a few. But I also had my job as a professor regardless, and I'm on leave from the University of Toronto, so at some point I'll go back to that job. The desire to serve and to step up and serve my community really fueled my ultimate decision to run, and it's been quite the ride. I will say there are difficult days. Ça c'est la raison pour laquelle je pense que nous devons continuer d'être dans le service public, dans ces positions-là. C'est très important. But I will say that the best thing about it has been meeting so many people across the country. As a professor, you're very much in your office and with your classes, but you don't get to meet people across the country on a daily basis. And I will say Canadians are incredible people. They are so resilient, and I am so grateful to be able to serve.
That's great. So you, as I mentioned, you're the first Hindu woman elected as a member of Parliament in Canada, and the first Hindu cabinet minister in this country. What does that mean to you, and what can we do to make sure that there are more women, more people of color, in leadership roles, not just in politics, but in business and elsewhere?
So another reason that I ran for office, when we talk about community engagement and serving, et je pense que c'est la même chose pour mes collègues ici, is that you want to ensure, and I certainly do and did, that our public and private institutions reflect the demographic composition of our country. And so that is true for me in terms of the university and for my sister in terms of hospitals. And it's one of the reasons why I ran for a public office in the House of Commons, because I didn't see anybody like me in the House of Commons. Mais en même temps, nous devons penser que c'est pas seulement en matière d'être femme ou d'être avocate ou d'être une personne qui pratique une sorte de religion. We all wear so many hats. We're moms, we're professionals, we're at schools and schoolyards with our kids, where, in my case, I'm a woman, it's impossible to separate out the hat you're wearing on any particular day. But I think as a general matter, if we take a step back and we say, let's create a work environment, regardless of the institution, where everyone feels accepted and respected. That's really, for me, the end goal. So it's not just a matter of religion or race or culture or sexual orientation. All of those things are important, and we need to make sure that we have welcoming work environments. But at the end of the day, we want our institutions to reflect the demographic composition of our entire population. And that means we have work to do. We have work to do, I'm sure, on council. We have work to do in government. We have work to do in hospitals and schools and universities and public and private corporations. Before I got to politics, you mentioned that I taught corporate law. Well, the area of law that I focused on was governance. And one time I was served on public and private boards, and one time I was on the governance committee of a board, and they had the list of characteristics that they wanted to focus on for their new board members. And it was, financial expertise and governance expertise, and at the end of the list they had diversity. And I said, well, diversity isn't something you go to university to learn, like financial literacy. Diversity is a fact. Inclusion is a choice. And that's what I think we should always remember when we're making decisions about the board compositions or whether we want to run for office and who we support in order to ensure that we have a diverse community in institutions across this country.
Do you talk to young women and people of color? Do you mentor anyone? Do you do that kind of work to ensure that there are others who are willing to make that leap?
Definitely. And I really draw on all that experience I just mentioned. Mais aussi, il y avait une fois when I was deciding to run for office where many of my friends came to me and said, you're racialized, you're a woman, you're not going to win. You're not going to win in Oakville. It's never been done. So, we care so much about you as a person. We don't want to see you disappointed. So it's probably a good idea for you not to run. And that was pretty disheartening. And I'll say that that was a lesson for me. And it's a lesson I tried to talk about with other women and racialized individuals who are seeking to run or thinking about running for office. Et je ne sais pas si, Yassir, par exemple, peut-être vous avez eu cette expérience aussi. But if we tell our youth that they will not succeed when they want to try to support our democracy, what future do we have as a country? What future do we have if we don't believe in the ability of our institutions to be non-discriminatory, and as equal as possible. That, to me, is a reason to say to naysayers that we have to try. Now, I'll say it sounds amazing, you know, that sounds like a succinct, packaged answer right now. At the time, I was devastated, and it was really hard to keep going. And I think that's a lesson in life as well, that, you know, as an adult, sometimes you think when you're a kid looking towards your adult years, you know, my life is going to be happy, just like it is as a kid. But when you're an adult, you do have dips. You do have highs and lows. And I think it's incumbent upon us to support people through those moments, through those hard times, so that we can have as many highs as possible in a supportive and a collective-oriented society. And that's really my goal.
That's great. However, I think it is fair to say that politics is a dangerous business. It's a tricky world. There's a lot of hostility and aggression, and people on social media and people shouting at you and those kinds of things. So the environment is not one where, when you're feeling low, people are there to prop you up. It's kind of the opposite of that. So what do you think about that? And as someone who has, spent a career elsewhere and then come to politics at this stage of your life, what can we do about that? How can we change that? How can we make it an environment where, people are still held to account for their decisions, but the personal side of it and the hostility the aggression isn't part of the environment?
Another one of my goals in coming into public office was to try to bring the political conversation, political discourse, to a more professional place where we are not lodging ad hominem attacks against our political adversaries, where we can reach across the aisle and see the good in everyone that chose to put their time and their life and their family on the line for a career of public service. Donc, j'essaie de parler, de participer dans les conversations avec mes collègues dans l'opposition. Je sais que c'est difficile quelquefois, but we have to keep trying to elevate the political discourse towards a rational conversation about policy, where we may not always agree, but where we disagree, there is a place where we can seek compromise. And that's really what motivates me in speaking with all sides of the House of Commons. But you're right, it's difficult right now. And as we build towards an election in 2025, we have to, and I in particular will continue to try to keep the discourse focused on policy. Kind of reminds me of when I was a professor, by contrast, is that often what we do is we put our paper that we've just written down on the table, and people debate the ideas in the paper that you've written. It's a conversation about ideas, about your position on policy, often. It's not a conversation about your integrity, and that has been one of the more difficult aspects of political life for me, when people question your honesty and your integrity and your trustworthiness. I had not had that before 2019. And so I am always finding it jarring when people question my motivation for being in public office. Donc peut-être nous pouvons essayer ensemble, vous êtes politicien vous-même. And I will say that we all have an obligation to elevate our discourse, regardless of whether we're in public or private life.
I agree. Let's talk about a couple of the roles that you've had in the federal cabinet. And I mentioned earlier that you were Public Services and Procurement Minister when the pandemic started. Just tell us what that experience was like, what you had to navigate, what lessons from your experience outside of politics perhaps you brought into that situation.
So it's kind of funny to have this conversation now when I can look back at those times. But I'll just take you back to what it was like in February 2020 when I was pulled into a boardroom to talk about PPE. And I remember writing down PPE ? Because everybody's using this acronym. And I had just been elected, c'est avec Mona, November. You were in the by-election before, but we were both put into cabinet the same time. And so it was just 4 or 5 months into into my role as PSPC minister. And I had a colleague who said to me on the day of our swearing in, he took me aside, he goes, "Don't worry, no one is going to know who you are. You're going to be in the background. You're going to learn how government works, and it will be a very good introduction to political life for you." And I was like, great, that's perfect. And I had comfort in those words. And then in March 2020, when I saw my colleagues, Chrystia Freeland and Bill Blair and Geneviève Duclos, Nav Baines doing press conferences, I would watch those press conferences, and then I was asked to join them, and then I was asked to talk about our procurements of PPE and vaccines and rapid tests. And I'll say again that it was the public service who rose to the occasion during the pandemic. I didn't know anything about being a minister, nothing. I'd been a minister for 5 months. I just started doing things my own way. I said to my deputy minister, we need 2 meetings a day. I need to talk to you every morning and every night. I need to get on the phone with all the procurement specialists. I need to have Zoom calls with them. I told them what we needed. I told them to diversify our procurements. That means diversification in terms of our location for procurement, in terms of our suppliers, in terms of our products, and we needed to do our contracting with integrity. And so that was an incredible time, but I'll just say I was very well supported by an incredible team at PSPC, and I will always be grateful for the work that they did and continue to do for our country. It's incredible.
So everybody kind of looked at you and said, okay, great, she did a wonderful job procuring vaccines and PPE for, during a global pandemic. Let's put her over at National Defense and fix the culture there. No small job, in that role, right? That was a huge challenge. So how did you tackle that one?
So let me just take you back to 2021. So 2021 was a really hard year for all of us. I think our whole country. 2020 was a really hard year. And at the beginning of 2021, our vaccine suppliers said, we're retooling our plant. This is Pfizer. We're retooling our plant. Your vaccine shipments are going to slow down for a few weeks. And I was wondering, again, who's going to make that announcement in the federal government? And then I realized it was me. So I get up and I'm going to tell the country that our vaccine supply, in the middle of the pandemic, our vaccine supplies are slowing down. That was really, really difficult. But by the end of the first part of the year, we were the most vaccinated country in the world, and we had the leadership position in the G7, G20 of vaccine procurement. So I knew that there was a strategy. I had the strategy and in place with the team, and we were able to see those vaccines come into the country. So July 2021 I was feeling a lot better about everything, speaking of the highs and the lows. But we had come through a very tough first 6 months. And so then we went right into an election, and I had not spoken with the Prime Minister until he he asked me to come in to meet with him after the election. And he said, you know, I'd like you to be the Minister of National Defense. And so I actually wasn't surprised then, because I had heard there were people saying you might be appointed on the news and stuff. So I had a piece of paper in my pocket with my priorities. I was ready in case he asked me, and he did ask me, and I had practiced that regardless of what he said, just like the first time, I would say I would be so honored, and I am so honored, and I'm super honored that the Prime Minister has chosen roles for me where I can work my hardest for the country. And so this is a very long-winded way to get to your question, Mark, and I apologize. But I'll just say that going into national defense, I was really excited to get to know an institution that needed some of the skills that I had, in particular in the area of governance and focusing on how we can do better for diverse communities, and in particular, women who have suffered sexual harassment and sexual misconduct. And so within days, it was less than a week of being appointed, I moved the cases of misconduct and sexual harassment under the criminal code from the military justice system to the civil justice system. And that was, I just looked at the interim recommendation from Madame Arbour on my desk and just said, we're doing it. And my team, I didn't really have a team because we had just moved portfolios, just said, or, you know, like today, I said, yeah, today, we're doing this today. And they said, well, we haven't written the reply to Madame Arbour yet. I said, I wrote it, here it is, just send it. And we did it. And that's kind of, for me, the type of leadership that I think is really important. When you have conviction about the stuff you're working on, you need to execute. And that's what I try to do wherever I go.
So now you're the Treasury Board President, and I think most people have no idea what that means. Just walk us through what Treasury Board is and what the work you actually do. I've heard it described as being like the chief operating officer of the government, effectively.
So that is the most frequent question I receive from people who you would think would know what the Treasury Board does. So I'll just take a step back.
Did Yasser ask that question? I'm just wondering.
No, not Yasser, or Mona, of course. My predecessor is here, so she is definitely someone who's so knowledgeable about the role. And so the expenditures of the federal government are about $450 billion every year. What the Treasury Board President does is to oversee those expenditures. Money does not leave the government, programs do not leave the government unless they are passing through the desk of the President of the Treasury Board, as well as the ministers who sit on Treasury Board. So it's an accountability function. It's a function that serves Canadian taxpayers by overseeing the spending of taxpayer dollars. It's an accountability function, and it's extremely important in terms of ensuring that there's a risk-based analysis that is utilized before taxpayer dollars leave the Government of Canada. That's as a general matter. Of course, Treasury Board President does a number of other things because it's one of very few central agencies of government. And so it plays a coordinating role. It is responsible for digital government, and we released the first ever cyber strategy across the Government of Canada yesterday. And so the areas of expertise within Treasury Board are also deliberate but comprehensive, and it's an extremely exciting portfolio to be able to lead. But again, there's a fantastic group of public servants that I am thankful for every single day.
You mentioned the cybersecurity work that you're doing. You also did a big review of spending at the federal level.
That was the first ever spending review done by our government, by the way, and that was phase one. We completed and tabled out those results in the main estimates, refocusing about $10 billion, and we're on track to refocus $15 billion over 5 years and $4.8 billion every year thereafter, and phase two of the spending review is occurring. So that's another function of Treasury Board. How can we ensure that taxpayer dollars are utilized effectively?
So obviously we have to talk about the discussion that's been going on about the future of the workforce at the federal government, and that's part of your portfolio. But I know decisions about the hybrid workforce, it's not made by one person who gets up in the morning and decides on those kinds of things. There's a lot of people involved, the clerk of the Privy Council and that entire team, the Prime Minister's office, the public service. So there's a lot of people involved in that decision. But I'm just interested to hear your thoughts on the background behind these kinds of decisions, how they get made, and then the future of hybrid work and the future of creating an environment that's inclusive and that works for everyone within the federal public service.
So definitely so you're right, that decision was made by the public service, was not a political decision. But I like to take a step back and say the return to the workplace has been difficult. COVID was definitely, a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic, which really was so hard on our workforce, on our country, on our institutions. And I think we actually haven't had a conversation yet that we need to have about the effects of COVID on our society. Because it has been so difficult. And so with that in mind, I will say in terms of hybrid, that hybrid work is important. It is important to have flexibility. It is important to be able to hear from public servants and employees generally about what they need to cope in the workplace. And so the move from 2 to 3 days to 3 days, it was still within the range that was put down in the policy before I became Treasury Board President, and it's 4 days for managers. So hybrid still exists in that respect, but there's also the possibility, which I think is really important and where we should focus our attention on accommodations and exemptions for public servants who need and require those exemptions. And so I really have faith that we will do more with the telework options so that public servants feel continually supported. As I said, my view is that we got through the pandemic with the public servants supporting our country so well, and we need to continue to support them.
The recent federal budget talked about the government moving out of a lot of buildings that it currently either owns or is leasing. And you heard me speak earlier about the fact that I am both worried and excited about the future of downtown Ottawa. There are big changes coming, and obviously that's a cause for concern, but I also see it as a historic opportunity. So I'm just interested in your thoughts on that and what that's going to look like, and the opportunity for us to work together on that, the federal government and the City of Ottawa and the Board of Trade and others. How can we work together to create an exciting future for downtown Ottawa that might include, for example, converting some office buildings to residential and doing other things that will bring more people downtown?
So you mentioned the budget. One of the main focal points of the federal budget was on the housing crisis in our country, and I believe that you signed an agreement with the federal government for more affordable housing here in Ottawa. And so that is part and parcel of a broader plan to increase supply in this country. And in particular, you've seen, even before the federal government, our initiatives to unlock supply. For example, removing the GST on purpose-built rentals, for example, ensuring that we have supports for renters and homeowners, for example, ensuring that we are utilizing federal lands effectively. But the federal lands portion of it is over a 10-year time frame, and it really will focus on unused properties. And we expect, if I have my numbers correct, it's about 20,000 federal properties that are owned or leased, and about 40,000 buildings, federal buildings. So when we talk about the federal building portion of it, it's really in the context of a broad portfolio that is operated out of PSPC, where there will be an examination of underutilized buildings. And that, as I said, should save the federal government billions of dollars over the 10-year period. But it is not going to be focused only on one city. It is really an across-the-country effort, because PSPC obviously has the jurisdiction across the country. But again, the focal point is really on how can we address the affordable housing issues across this country, especially for younger generations, Gen Z and millennials in particular.
And so there is an opportunity, though, for us to work together on the future of downtown and more. I mean, we already are working together on affordable housing and housing in general, but I'm excited to see where that could lead.
Exactly, and I think that this really reflects what I conceive to be the most important aspect of political life, taking a step back. You're an elected representative, I'm an elected representative, and we have provincial counterparts in our respective towns and across the country, obviously. And if we are going to accomplish important and big things for our country, we actually need to put partisanship aside and sit down and have conversations about the real problems that we seek to address and how we can reach compromise to do so. There is, I have learned, il n'y a pas de solution parfaite dans notre politique. C'est toujours un mécanisme de coordination, de collaboration, et j'essaie chaque jour d'avoir une relation avec mes homologues, de faire ça, donc d'accomplir ça chaque jour, parce que c'est pas possible d'avoir une solution parfaite. So with that issue that you are, and this whole community of individuals is addressing, of course, there needs to be a collaborative conversation. And we need to realize also that there are other issues on the table that are going to be addressed at the same time.
Last question. You in this role.
It could be a friendly question, Mark.
Yeah.
These are all hard. I like to have a friendly, funny question. You got any of those?
We can talk more about your daughter's weightlifting championship if you want. So in this job, and as I've learned, you're constantly dealing with immediate and urgent stuff. I'm just interested to hear what aspirations you have, what hopes you have for the future of Canada and for the future of your work as an elected official. What are your aspirations? What do you hope for?
So that's a pretty deep question. I wouldn't classify it as funny, or I'm not going to be able to provide any jokes at this stage given that question, but maybe after. No, in all seriousness, I see us, whether we're talking about Ottawa or Ontario or our country as a whole, we're in a building or rebuilding phase post-COVID. And in this rebuilding phase, we have to approach our policy decisions and our problems with a measured and collaborative spirit. Our younger generations are watching us. They're seeing a country that has been torn apart because of a once-in-a-lifetime pandemic. And we owe it to them, and we owe it to our colleagues, and we owe it to the older generation who largely built this country to have respectful dialogue about complex policy issues and reach solutions that at least attempt to hear the other side and to construct a policy solution that will work for everyone. If we don't do that, the younger generations and even our peers are going to give up, and they're going to lose hope in what is the greatest country in the world. And we've got to be leaders, each of us, in our spheres, to show Canadians and our families that we got this. We're here for you. We will work together, and we will continue to build the greatest country in the world.
Wonderful. That's a great place to wrap up. I just want to say how much I admire what you've done and the decision that you took to step out of, the quiet life into the noisy environment of politics, and to do that as a woman and the first Hindu woman to be a member of parliament and first Hindu to serve in cabinet.